Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and David Bartkey here. It's Thursday, June the 15th, 2017. David, the year's almost halfway over.
How can that be? I know it's crazy. It's just flying by. Totally flying by.
Unbelievable.
Yes.
Well,
but I'm just glad summer's here. You know?
Me too. Well, actually, it's not officially here, but we can pretend it is.
Yeah.
One more week to go, then it's officially here.
Yes.
But we are in episode 2 of our ongoing series about The Secret by Rhonda Byrne.
Yay.
Yeah. We got off to a good start last week. And this week we're looking at the second chapter, which is entitled The Secret Made Simple. It's actually a pretty short chapter. It's only about 8 or 10 pages or something like that.
Oh, okay.
But it continues to explain what was laid out in the first chapter, The Secret Revealed, about what is the secret revealed? Well, it's the law of attraction. Okay, so what is this law of attraction? And the chapter is basically devoted to quotes from a number of the presenters, all of them giving their own take on what the law of attraction is and how to understand it. Your favorite guy, Michael Bernard Beckwith, starts the whole thing off. He says, we live in a universe in which there are laws, just as there is a law of gravity. If you fall off a building, it doesn't matter if you're a good person or a bad person, you're going to hit the ground. That's such a warm, fuzzy thought. But it's true. I mean, and he's laying a groundwork by saying, look, this isn't just some mystical pie in the sky. This happens continuously all the time. Even though we're not aware of it, even though many of us haven't noticed the pattern, it's there. It's not like it goes away.
Totally, and it's always good to remember, and I have to remind myself as well, is that law of attraction is always responding to us, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, always. Not just like when we remember, like, oh, I better think something positive, but it's always responding to us, and that's once you kind of get that, it's like, wow, that's pretty powerful.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's exactly what the next quote is. This is Dr. Joe Vitale, who says, everything that surrounds you right now in your life, including the things you're complaining about, you've attracted. Yeah, that sounds great. Right. Now, I know at first blush, he says that's going to be something you hate to hear. You're going to immediately say, I didn't attract the car accident. I didn't attract this particular client who gives me a hard time. I didn't particularly attract the debt. And I'm here to tell you a little bit in your face and say, yes, you did attract it. This is one of the hardest concepts to get, but you've got to accept it. It's life transforming. And I'm glad that they did that. I'm glad that they got to the reality of it quickly, even though it's confusing for somebody who's hearing this for the first time. Because I know it was confusing for me. Like, well, if it's working all the time, why is all this bad stuff happening? I'm attracting it? No, wait a minute. Stop.
But why do you think that is? Why do you think people do attract accidents and this and that?
Oh, I think it's because of what we're trained to do from the moment we're born. I mean, we live in a life where the moment that we emerge from the womb, we are 100% completely dependent on the big people, especially one or two very important big people in our lives, our parents.
Yeah.
And from that day forward, because parents are just like everybody else out there, we're kind of wandering around trying to, do the best we can in this crazy physical environment.
Yeah.
Because of that, well, to put it nicely, mistakes happen. And sometimes these mistakes become cultural, and they get absorbed and carried on from generation to generation. One of the most common things we can all point to is how many times little kids hear no. The word no is probably the first word they remember the best, and it's the one they hear more often than any other word when they're growing up. Well, you keep hearing no all the time. That's going to affect your conscious and your subconscious mind. It's going to affect the way you look at the universe. Your reaction may vary depending on what kind of person you end up being, in a sense. If you're aggressive or passive or whatever it might be in the middle. The point is that because you're hearing that same word no all the time, you're going to have some kind of a negative reaction to it. And that's where the whole process of negativity starts off, and we end up finding lots of negativity in our lives as we're growing up, as we become young adults, as we become full adults. I mean, let's be honest, negativity is everywhere. So when you live in a culture, and this is true really for any culture around the planet, when you live in a culture where negativity abounds, well, of course you're going to start attracting bad stuff. all that you're thinking about a large chunk of the time is negative. How could the bad stuff not show up? That's the way I look at it.
So you're saying, so if someone gets into a car accident, it's not necessarily that they were thinking about getting into a car accident. It's
right.
That's just how it manifested based on whatever they were thinking about.
Yeah. Law of attraction gurus express it in terms of vibration. And I'm kind of glad they didn't bring the word vibration in just yet, because that's kind of a tough concept if you haven't heard it before. But you don't even have to think about it in terms of vibration. You can think about it in terms of similarity of stuff. I mean, negative stuff is similar to negative stuff. Positive stuff is similar to other positive stuff. It may not be the same stuff, the happiness of having your first child is not the same as the happiness of buying your first house or taking that vacation you want to take forever. They're all different, but they're very much they're similar. The similarity is there, and it's the similarity that makes the difference. It isn't that you're going to put out a negative thought about a car accident, and the only thing that can come back is a car accident. It can come back as anything that's similarly negative. That's the way I look at it. Is that similar to what you have in mind?
Yeah, but you know where I've noticed it the most, though, is a lot of people that are sick, they get sick a lot, tend to get sick a lot.
Oh,
You know what I'm saying? And a lot of people that don't tend not to. And a lot of people that get sick a lot, they spend a lot of their time focusing on about how sick they are.
Yes. And
I think that manifests to other illness at some point with with the same person.
It's interesting. I've been reading a book by a researcher, a neuroscientist named Dr. Candace Pert. And she wrote this book a few years back called The Molecules of Emotion. Basically, I think I told you about her last week. She's the one. Yeah, she's the one who first discovered the opiate receptor in the human nervous system. And the discovery was certainly groundbreaking, but she also did a lot of work after that and produced a lot of very interesting stuff, some of which is still influencing research fields today. I mean, it's quite remarkable what she's come up with. But anyway, in the course of telling her story, the first, 20, 30, 40% of the book is all about the science that she's done. The rest of the book is about the theories that that are relatively untested, but the theories that she's developed about basically how her worldview is and how that worldview has been influenced by the research she has done. And a lot of it ties into, she doesn't call it law of attraction, but sort of the new agey stuff, alternative healing practices and so on and so forth. I think she said it was in 1983 or 84, something like that. She met a psychotherapist, and I'm probably going to get the therapist's name wrong. It was like Carolyn Sterling or Carolyn Sperling or something like that. But anyway, she met this therapist, and the therapist had acquired cancer in the mid-70s. I want to say 76, something like that. And apparently was given very quickly a terminal illness diagnosis. Like, she wasn't going to live very long. Well, of course, by that time, she'd lived for, 7 years, something like that, 8 years.
Wow.
And her success, she said, was due to the fact that she started to, first she was diving into all the different options that are out there that people suggest for, how do you alternatively fight cancer. But what she tapped into was the idea that, and apparently there's some scientific research to back this, if you have a lot of repressed emotions, particularly negative emotions, they can come back to haunt you in the sense that they can actually encourage your body to do things like create cancer.
Yes, I believe that. Yeah, I definitely believe that.
And apparently there is some evidence to suggest that it's a reasonable assumption to make.
Yes.
Because of that, she started creating a new kind of therapy where people are encouraged to release negative emotions.
Yes.
And she had a whole methodology for it. Apparently it was quite successful in the sense that people were able to do this. Candace Pert herself tried it. She found she had this cascade of negative emotion that came out. So she became a believer in it. Now, this book was written a few years back, so I said, well, geez, I wonder what happened to this Carolyn Sperling, whatever she was. So I did a little research and found she lived until 1991.
Oh, wow.
At which point she died of cancer. And I thought, well,
but by
that's
then,
really...
how old? Like, that was a long time, though, after that.
Yeah, so that was about 15 or 16 years after the diagnosis.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, she did very well because
Yeah.
she totally outlived what, the prognosis said she was going to do. On the other hand, she still died from cancer. So here's the thought process that went through my head. See what you think. I'm wondering if she's focusing all that time on getting out these negative emotions, what's she spending her time on? She's focusing on negatives.
Yeah.
She's doing it to a positive purpose, but she's focusing on negatives. What if she had taken it as a first step to release negative emotions, and then at the next step focused on changing, pivoting, turning the whole thing around to, okay, now let's focus on feeling lots and lots and lots of positive emotions? Would she have still died of cancer? Would she have lived longer? What would have happened? And I don't know what the answer is there, but I just have this gut feeling that she would have had a longer, healthier life.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could talk to her, like, to find out what her dominant thoughts were. You know?
Yeah, well, sure. Yeah, we all would, because that's the key, isn't it? Even if we're saying to our friends and neighbors, yeah, I'm on a more positive kick, if we're not doing that in our private, the privacy of our own heads, it's like, well, how's anybody going to know, right?
That's it. And our dominant thoughts are what we're putting out. So it would have been interesting to see what her dominant thoughts were for that reason, to see if it was correlated to why she still ended up with cancer.
Well, if the law of attraction is as valid as we think it is, and we both do believe in it, it probably means that we already have the evidence that at least toward the end of her life, she was having trouble with negative thoughts. You know? I suspect that's true.
Yeah.
So anyway, continuing the chapter, so now Dr. Vitale has totally depressed us. They go on, and the next quote is by a guy named Bob Doyle, who is not, he doesn't seem to be one of the major presenters, but he also has some interesting stuff that he brings up occasionally.
Yeah.
And he talks about what you and I were starting to talk about. He says, most of us attract by default. We just think that we don't have any control over it. Our thoughts and feelings are on autopilot, and so everything is brought to us by default. And boy, oh boy, I don't know about you. That describes me right after I read The Secret. And it's taken me a while. It took me quite some time to even believe part way that I could control my own. I knew I could control my own thoughts to some degree. But I also knew I had this cascade of thoughts that just kept, I mean, I'd always had ideas coming to me. I didn't even know where they all came from.
Right.
But there's a constant flow of them. And I'm saying, well, I'm not sure how much I can control them. I can certainly choose some thoughts. But some of the time, the thoughts are just flowing anyway while I'm doing other stuff, you know?
Yeah.
So I was a little bit dubious about that, and I was totally dubious about the idea of controlling my emotions. Because the way I was looking at it, and I think we talked about this before, I thought that my emotions were dependent on what happened. So if something happy happened, I would feel happy. If something sad happened, I would feel sad. The whole idea that I could actually influence my feeling regardless of stuff happening was anathema. It just didn't seem possible.
Yep, and it is possible. It's totally possible.
And it was quite a breakthrough when I discovered that I could actually do it.
Yes.
Because from the moment that I realized I could do that, I said, wow. Because I know that not everybody, the vast majority of people live by default reaction to their emotional state for whatever's going on in their lives. So this is pretty revolutionary, this whole concept of people controlling their own emotions. Imagine if people actually get a hold of that and start doing it on a regular basis. Seriously, we'll have a very different world when that happens.
That would be very nice,
Yeah. I mean, something I look forward to. It's one of the reasons we do the show.
Yeah, and with law of attraction, once you delve into it and find out more and more about it, you do start realizing and experiencing that we're not a victim to our emotions, that we can control. And it doesn't mean like we're not robots. It doesn't mean like we never get sad or unhappy. It's just when we do, are we staying there, or are we taking action to gently lift ourselves up out of there?
Yeah, that's the fun part, because I've realized that if I'm feeling bad about something, if I'm feeling down about something, I don't have to stay there. I don't have to wait for a good event to come along. I can actually create a new emotion for myself. Like,
that's right.
That's very, very empowering to know that.
Yes, I also think based on whatever happened that put someone there, sometimes it might take a little longer to get yourself out of it, but that's okay, just as long as you're getting to the point where you do get yourself up out of it.
Yeah, and it's not like you even have to do it all at once. In fact, that's really kind of hard to do, to be perfectly honest. You have to do it
just little by little, step by step.
Yeah. I mean, you can actually do it fairly short time if you really work at it. You can probably do it, depending on how practiced you are at it. I've been able to shift myself dramatically over a period of like 10 to 15 minutes of really concerted work. But it takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
That takes a ton of work. And a lot of practice. Oh, good grief.
Yes.
But it's worth it, no doubt. Now, Dr. Joe Vitale, I think Dr. Joe Vitale, I think his role is to throw water on everything.
Well, what is he saying now?
Well, what he says is, now, if this is your first time to hear this, it may feel like, oh, I have to monitor my thoughts? This is going to be a lot of work. It will seem like that at first, but that's where the fun begins. And that's what we were talking about, really.
And that's a lot of my clients get frustrated with that, because they're like, I've been doing this for a week and I'm still whatever. I'm like, yes, a week is not long. Like, we always want everything instant, but when it comes to this kind of work, you have to put in the time and the practice.
Oh, yeah. My wife used to be a psychotherapist, and one of the things that she would tell me that would happen often, she did a lot of work with people who were dependent on various drugs and alcohol and so forth. And whenever you get somebody new, a new client in, the common practice for a therapist is to do what they call an intake, which is basically an examination where they're trying to find out, who you are, what's your situation, what's your mental state, all that kind of stuff. And in the process of doing the intake, one of the things that they'll ask if they know that the person has a history of drug abuse or alcohol abuse is, are you currently drinking? Have you been drinking lately, or have you been drugging lately? And often the response comes back, oh, no, I'm on the wagon now. I'm completely off it. I was like, oh, great. How long? Oh, since 9 o'clock this morning.
Yeah.
That seems like a long time.
Yeah.
Well, that's just it. It seems like a long time. It actually isn't. I mean, for somebody who's non-alcoholic, that's like, well, yeah, so what? But for somebody who is, dripping with alcohol, they're sweating it out of their pores because they're so deeply addicted to it. Not drinking from 9 o'clock, since 9 o'clock, that's a big deal.
Yes.
That's a really big deal. So that's what your clients are expressing. I mean, I'm not saying they're alcoholics, but that's what your clients are expressing. They're basically saying, wow, it just seems like it's so long.
And the other thing with that is sometimes we feel it takes long to manifest certain things we want. And I feel like we humans, like, we want everything to happen quickly, but the universe has its own time. So to the universe, a few weeks, a few months is not a long time. You know what I'm saying? Like, we want everything to happen immediately, but, there's time is an interesting thing to talk about, because you could think of it in so many different ways.
It is, yeah, there's no doubt about that. The other thing that always confused me from the beginning when I first heard about The Secret and the Law of Attraction was, why is it that the time delay varies? And they haven't actually talked about the time delay yet in The Secret. We haven't gotten there yet. But when they do talk about it, they talk about how there's a delay factor. But they don't define how long the delay is going to be, and they imply that it can vary dramatically. So that was a question that entered my head right off the bat. Well, what's causing the delay? There's got to be something, especially if there's a variability to it.
Yeah.
There's got to be something going on. And, of course, what it really is our own resistance.
Right, yeah. The more resistance we have towards something, the more we're blocking it, and the longer it's going to take.
So if somebody's asking how long is it going to take, the answer is, well, it really depends. How long do you plan on resisting?
Yes, that's right.
Now, Marcy Shimoff comes up next, and she says it's impossible to monitor every thought we have. Researchers tell us that we have about 60,000 thoughts a day. Can you imagine how exhausted you'd feel trying to control all 60,000 of those thoughts? Fortunately, she says there's an easier way, and it's our feelings. Our feelings let us know what we're thinking. And Bob Doyle kicks in with, the emotions are an incredible gift that we have to let us know what we're thinking. And Lisa Nichols says you have two sets of feelings, good feelings and bad feelings, and you know the difference between the two because one makes you feel good and the other makes you feel bad. Duh. It's the depression, it's the anger, it's the resentment, it's the guilt. It's those feelings that don't make you feel empowered. Those are the bad feelings. The flip side is that you have good emotions and good feelings. You know when they come because they make you feel good. Excitement, joy, gratitude, love. Imagine if we could feel that way every day. When you celebrate the good feelings, you'll draw to you more good feelings and things that make you feel good. And I got to tell you, that's been my goal very early on since I read The Secret and saw the movie for the first time. Within 6 months, my goal was I want to feel good every day.
Yeah.
And it was really depressing to realize how much of my day I was not feeling good. And
wow, that's a huge awareness. Yeah,
well, it is a huge awareness, but at the time it's also a huge source of depression because I'm saying to myself, oh my God, I have so far to go.
But you needed to have that amazing awareness to go from that point forward. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. That was critical. I'm just trying to identify what it felt like at that time. It felt overwhelming. And I suspect that's part of what your client is saying, who's saying, well, it's been a week now and I haven't gotten anywhere. He's feeling the same level of overwhelm.
Yeah.
In fact, I read an interesting Abraham Hicks quote that came over my desk just a few days ago. It said that overwhelmment is an example of how you are resisting what you have asked for. And the reduction of overwhelmment for most people is the universe pulling back so that you are no longer overwhelmed. But in pulling back, it's basically not delivering what you asked for because now you're resisting it. Yeah. And also with Abraham Hicks, she talks about our emotional guidance system. And that's also kind of fits with what we're talking about, how you can just, it's important to check in with yourself and get used to okay, where am I right now? Am I feeling low vibration? Am I feeling down? Or am I feeling just okay? Or am I feeling yay, I'm just feeling so happy today? And that's checking in with that. Then you can do something about it if you have to make yourself feel better. Many gurus tell us, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you feeling? I like to make a scale of -10 to +10. The reason I picked that is 0 is neutral. And the reason I like that is because for the longest time, I thought of neutral as neutral. It wasn't for 3 or 4 or 5 years into this that I finally realized that neutral is actually a variation of negative. So if I think of it in terms of -10 to +10, what I'm really saying is anything below +1 is not desirable. So I want to be at least +1. And I like that better than the 1 to 10 range because 1 to 10, well, where's the desirable?
Well, I think it's in the moment. If someone's at a 2, then it's more desirable for them to get themselves to a 3 or a 4.
Well, that's true.
That's kind of how I look at it.
That's true. But what I'm aiming for, I basically saying I want to go for the top half.
Yeah,
I don't want to mess around with the bottom half because I've lived far too long in that bottom half.
Yeah. No, it's definitely better to be in the upper part.
Oh, it really is. And I can say it's taken me a number of years, but I've gotten to the point now where I am living a large portion of my time every single day in that top positive half.
Fantastic. Yes. Yes.
And it feels so much better.
But even using the 1 to 10 scale with clients, I've had some clients that say, well, I'm at a -2.
Yeah.
And then a week later they say they're at a 1, and I'm like, that's really good.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. It kind of depends what's going on. But so someone who was at a -2 who's at a week later is at a 1, that's really good.
It is progress. Anything that's upward is progress.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely.
And that's the way to look at it. The thing that also helped me a lot is the idea of the pivot, which we've talked about before.
Yeah.
But it's a good way to remain what I guess they're calling it mindful now. Although they're also just using mindful to describe breathing techniques, so I get a little confused about it. But conscious, present, aware of what's going on right now is what I'm talking about.
Yes.
And when you're in that place, and you have begun to notice that for this moment in time, I am not feeling as good as I'd like to feel. I like the fact that I'm noticing that. My mindfulness is making it easier for me to do that. And that's where I start to, it took me a while to even start doing this part, but I started to practice, okay, what can I pivot to? What's the positive, or even a semi-positive, or maybe a little slice of positive I can pivot to?
Yes, and I also like pivoting when you become aware enough to catch yourself thinking about something in a more negative way, and then in that moment immediately flipping it and, asking yourself, okay, well, what do I want then regarding whatever it was you were talking about? And that's a big thing to get too. Like if you really do that, that's like a big thing. So
what's your favorite, do you have like a default one that you use if you can't think of something positive? You have one default thing you use? I mean, for me, the default thing, if I can't find something else, I say to myself, at least we got good weather. it's the weather or my cats or my wife. One of those three things. Yes.
It's, as Abraham Hicks says, just go general.
Yeah.
Go general. Think about the weather. Look out your window. Look at the nice flowers or whatever. Anything general that makes you feel good, go for it.
Colors are good too.
Yes.
Especially if there's one or two colors that are your favorite, and they're your favorite because they make you feel good. Look for those colors.
I also like just start thinking about different activities you like and why you like them. Like, I really love going hiking. I just love being outdoors and seeing nature and just being connected to the earth. It just makes me feel so good. And, just think about, everyone has different activities they like. So just start doing that. And that also will gently start pulling you up a little bit.
It does. I mean, that's actually my wife's favorite thing to do. She remembers it in terms of specific events. It's not just sort of a general thing. I like it when I'm hiking. I like it when I'm biking. She'll, like, for instance, earlier in the beginning of the month, we ended up taking a trip to northern Maine.
Right.
And here's an example of a pivot. We actually made the trip because we needed to go up for a burial. Her aunt, who had lived to like 95 years old, had died. And she'd actually died in January, but you don't hold burials in January in northern Maine. It just doesn't work. The ground is too hard.
Yeah.
So you do it, in June. And so beginning of June is when we went up, and that was the purpose. But here's the pivot. We said, well, how long does a burial last? It's like a half an hour. What are you going to do the rest of the time?
True. Right.
So the rest of the time was all about catching up with some family, going out and having lobster, having more lobster, going out and see scenic views because Maine is gorgeous, just all these wonderful things. And so the trip became one really, really nice thing after another with one little blip in the middle.
Right.
Right. And it's those wonderful things that happen. I mean, one of the things that my wife constantly remembers. My wife is so good at remembering meals. And I don't mean what she had yesterday. I mean what she had 17 years ago.
Oh, my goodness.
That's the way she associates things. So, for instance, from this trip, I can think of two places where we ate that were memorable. I'm sure they were memorable for her, and they were memorable for me, too, which is actually unusual for me. I usually don't remember food. She's the one who remembers food. But there was one where we went to on the way back, we were halfway down the coast, and we went to a place outside of Bangor called Belfast, right on the coastline. I went to this little restaurant, and it was just absolutely great Maine lobster. I mean, maniacs do lobster better than the rest of New England, let alone the rest of the country. They really do. Because they have better lobster, let's be perfectly honest. It's right there,
Right.
It's fresh. And they're very good at cooking it. Well, it was just delicious. We were just, our senses were just gorged. There is no other way to describe it. It was just a wonderful thing.
Eating that fantastic meal raised your vibration in the moment.
It absolutely did. And we're sitting on the water. We're looking out on the water as we're eating this. And this nice warm, it's not real cold. It's not real warm. It's just that nice, cool, comfortable realm. It was just ideal. It was idyllic.
Yes.
So that gives us a memory, and that memory, if I'm in a bad place, well, this is what my wife does actually. If she's in a bad place or having a tough time, she'll draw that memory in and just remind herself.
Yeah,
she'll
just think about something that makes you feel good. Absolutely.
She'll just relive sitting in that restaurant, or actually it was outside. It was al fresco, sitting outside, under the umbrella and looking out in the water and eating this delicious fish and just like, oh, that was just wonderful. Just reliving that moment.
There's actually a process from Abraham Hicks called virtual reality where you do, it's similar to what you're talking about, where you recall an experience in the past that was just so wonderful that just thinking about it and remembering the details about it raises your vibration. And then when you feel that peak of raised vibration, you just stop telling yourself the story and you just enjoy the raised vibration.
Yes. Yeah. That's a key.
Because if you go too far with your story, you'll take yourself down the other side.
Yes.
So you have to kind of learn to stop when you're peaking. You stop and you just enjoy that wonderful raised vibration.
Yeah, you live for that moment.
Yes.
And ultimately, that's what we're talking about when we talk about getting ourselves into a positive frame of mind on a regular basis. We're talking about creating a series of moments.
Deliberately doing that.
Yes.
Yes.
And when we get good at doing that, I don't do it so much with food. My wife's good at that. For me, it's more like the basics that I was talking about. But nevertheless, no matter what way you do it, that's how you start getting into that continuous positive, in the vortex, as Abraham Hicks calls it. That very great place where just things, it doesn't, and stuff happens anyway. I mean, it's not like your life's bad stuff doesn't happen anymore. But when it does happen, you just don't care.
You don't care, and you handle it in a healthier way.
Yes, that's really the big deal.
Than you did before you knew about this. Because before you knew about this, you would linger in it and complain about it and be stuck in it for a long time.
So
once you know about law of attraction, and that's not healthy to do because you'll just attract more of those type of experiences, then you start deliberately raising yourself. So which is wonderful.
So as Jack Canfield says, our feelings are a feedback mechanism to us about whether we're on track or not, whether we're on course or not. That's what we're doing. We're using our feedback mechanism, and then we're using tricks like the pivot to get ourselves to that better place.
For sure.
So, okay. Next up, Michael Bernard Beckwith is back again, and and he says, you can begin right now to feel healthy. You can begin to feel prosperous. You can begin to feel the love that's surrounding you, even if it's not there. And what will happen is the universe will correspond to the nature of your song. The universe will correspond to the nature of that inner feeling and manifest because that's the way you feel. That's a really nice, that's a very lyrical description of the law of attraction.
Yes. And I love that because it just reminds us that it doesn't matter if something is real or not. If you're in the vibration of it, then you're going to attract it. And that's what I love about it. Like, somebody wants, like, I always like to use money as an example because everybody likes more money. So even if someone doesn't have a lot of money, but they deliberately put themselves in the vibration and the feeling of having a lot of money, then they're going to start attracting more money in different ways.
Yep, absolutely. Now,
and and sometimes it's not the money. Sometimes someone takes you go to lunch with friends, and they pay for it.
Yeah.
Or, it could be things like that. Sometimes it isn't the actual money, and sometimes it is, but sometimes it's gifts or someone pays for a meal or things like that.
Yeah, you have to look for those little, what are often called serendipities.
Yeah.
The little things that happen that are very easily ignored, but you don't want to ignore them. You want to actually pay close attention to them because they help you on your quest to stay feeling good.
That's right.
Now, in the movie and in the book also, she incorporates a number of quotes from famous people, and we have one of those here from Winston Churchill, of all people.
Interesting.
Apparently, he said or wrote, "You create your own universe as you go along." Now, that's quite a quote for Winston Churchill. I would not have associated that one with him.
I know, right? Yeah.
But
interesting.
Yeah, that's a big thing. Creating your own universe as you go along is the essence of using the law of attraction. I'm sure he didn't know the phrase, but he apparently understood how it worked.
Yeah.
I just wish he'd stop thinking about war. But other than that...
Yeah, right. Yeah. I don't like with the other person, I wish he was here so we could say, when you said that quote, what exactly were you
what did you have in mind? Right.
Yeah, what's the equation that made you think that? What happened? But we can't ask him, so we can just try to do our best to figure out what he meant.
Yeah, that's about all you can do at this point. That's okay. So moving
like,
along.
But for you, like, how do you think you create your own universe?
How do I create it?
Yeah.
By living. I mean, literally, if it's really true, if you buy into the idea that what we think about manifests, and we haven't gotten to the
that's what I was going to say, by living and by your thoughts and by what you're spending your time thinking about.
Yeah. If we really buy into that theory, then literally, of course the universe is created by our thoughts. Of course, this whole thing that we're experiencing here is sort of our joint creation, all the beings who have come before us and the ones who are here now. What we're seeing is what we're getting out of all those thought patterns going on. Which is a little daunting, but it's also it's also explanatory because, among other things, it's saying we are all empowered.
Yes, and I love, once you really get, like, it's always we're spending our time thinking about. I mean, I love knowing that and getting that because it's just so powerful and so true.
And when you're trying to apply this in your own life, do you have a particular way you like to do it?
Well, with what we're talking about now, I constantly just check in with myself, like, how am I feeling? How am I vibrating? Where am I on the scale? And I've had so much practice at it now that I just kind of automatically shift, if I need to, into better thoughts, and then better thoughts, and then better thoughts. But I'm kind of like you now, where I would say, most of my day I am at a high vibration, which is amazing. I mean, sometimes for me, and let me know if you've experienced this, I'm just at such a high vibration, like I don't even want to go to sleep. I mean, we have to go to sleep because we get tired, but I'm like, I'm just feeling so high vibration, I don't want to go to sleep yet,
Well, I've actually been following the Abraham Hicks approach to what sleep is, what the purpose of sleep is.
Ooh, and what do they say? What does Abraham say about that?
The purpose of sleep is to reset. So, in other words, you can actually help yourself along this line. As you're going to sleep, you can say to yourself, I am putting manifesting on hold. I'm going to press the reset button. The law of attraction is slowing down to a stop while I sleep. And in the course of my sleep, I will regain my energy so that when I wake up, I can be all excited about my next day. Interesting thing, I was talking about Dr. Candace Pert before. She makes the point, and this I didn't know actually, when you sleep, your body pours gigantic amounts of peptides throughout your body. And the purposes of those peptides are amino acid strings.
Right.
And they are what make up hormones. They make up almost everything that's in the body, really. But they certainly make up all of the body experiences, positive and negative, including being sick.
Right.
But they also impact the way we feel about things. I mean, hormones, particularly endocrine type stuff, that's all about feeling stuff. So what the peptides are doing is they're basically going throughout the body as much as can be done within the time of your sleep cycle and hitting all the receptors in such a way that the receptors are basically being reset. So the research actually parallels the theory.
Interesting.
Yeah. Your body is resetting for the next day. And then when you wake up, if you...
So I would say it's important to go intentionally go to sleep with an intention of getting a wonderful sleep, and I'm going to wake up feeling rested and excited about the day, kind of like pre-paving that whole thing. Sounds good to me.
In fact, if for people who want to, you can actually go onto YouTube. There are a whole bunch of videos that have used this. But there's one little segment they did, like 9 or 10 minutes, at one particular event. And Abraham gave us a series of affirmations to say to reinforce this. The first 5 or so are just about what you do when you go to sleep, and then the rest are like 2 pages of what you do when you wake up. The first part says, while I sleep, momentum is going to cease for me. My point of attraction is resting. I'm experiencing, while I sleep, a law of attraction reprieve. In other words, it's a resting place where momentum subsides. While I'm sleeping tonight, momentum subsides. So that's what you do when you're going to sleep. When you wake up in the morning, you say, I have pushed the reset button. I push the reset button, and now I can jump into any vibrational point that I choose, and I choose to jump in a really general place. I choose to jump into a place of, oh, this bed feels so good, and oh, such a great night's sleep, and I sure did like this about it, and wasn't that a beautiful thing, and isn't it feeling good to be me? And then there's this long list that they give you.
Right,
so,
right.
So you can just go through it. I actually transcribed the whole thing. I put it on. If people who want it, I put it onto the loatoday.net website, so you can find it there. But
yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, it's really useful, and I've started to use that as part of my affirmations every day, and it's giving a new flavor to it. I like it.
But what about dreams? What do you think dreams have to do with anything?
Again, Candace Pert has an interesting thing to say about dreams. She thinks that dreams are your subconscious mind telling you about what it is that your body is working on. And for her, your body is your subconscious mind.
Right.
Which is kind of a revolutionary thought. When she said that numerous times in her talks, her audience would gasp because the subconscious mind was always thought of as being more ethereal than that. She's saying it's literally your body, your physical body is your subconscious mind. And the reason she says that is because of all the research they've done that has determined that when memory is stored, first of all, it isn't all stored in the brain. It's stored throughout the body.
Right.
And second of all, it's stored by these peptides connecting to receptors. They can actually detect where it's going. So if there's like a particular event and a memory associated with it, it will store at a particular place somewhere in the body. In fact, this whole concept that psychotherapists have about repressed emotions are repressed memories. And they're literally memories that have been stored somewhere in the body where the associative connection has been cut off.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So with that model in mind, it becomes pretty evident that all of your body is where all your memory is.
But how would you associate dreams with law of attraction? Like
so the purpose,
say you have a crazy dream, like you're being chased by aliens in the field, and or whatever. Sometimes we have these crazy dreams.
So she's claiming that the purpose of dreams is to use the dream state, use the metaphors that go on in a dream state to communicate to us what's going on physically in our bodies. So if we have a dream about, what was it you just said? I can't remember what you said.
Like being chased by aliens.
Okay. So
this craziness.
What's a possible explanation for being chased by aliens? Well, if you have some sort of an infection going on in your body, that's kind of being chased by aliens. So those kinds of parallels are what you're looking for.
But what do you think though? Like, what do you think? Like, if you have do you think having a good dream, a bad dream, a dream about certain things, do you think it's all symbolic, or do you think has anything to do with your vibration or not? Or
well, my thinking has shifted continuously, fluidly over the years. I don't really have a clear answer to the question in terms of what I think. I would say if I have to pick what I think right now, this very instant, I think that dreams are the way that our brain gets cleaned out. And indeed our psyche gets cleaned out. So it's a way of washing away the junk. It's also, I have found on very limited occasions, I think it's also a way sometimes to connect into the other side spiritually. And the reason I say that, I've had actual experiences. I've had, shortly after my father died, I had an experience like that. I had an entire conversation with him in a dream, and I can tell you it was the most real dream I ever had. By leaps and bounds. If the energy of a typical dream is a 1, this was like a 25. It was that big of a difference.
That was one of those that was so vivid you actually felt like it was happening.
Oh yeah, it was very vivid. Yeah. And by the way, I've told Joel this many times, but I'll tell you too. I am actually very poor at visualizing, whether in a dream state or consciously.
Right.
It took me the longest time to come to the realization that when other people say they can visualize something, they actually see a full picture. You probably do. I don't. And when I first discovered that was true, I said, well, what's wrong with me? Why can't I see? Because I don't. I have little fragments. I have little pieces of something. I don't see a full picture. So trying to analyze a dream in terms of what the pictures were, what the sequence of things that I saw in a movie, that's not the way it works for me.
Right.
So my explanation about what I think is happening in a dream is probably not going to fit for anybody else.
But I just think it's interesting because I've had people tell me, like, I went to sleep and I was at a really high vibration and I felt really good, and then I had a horrible nightmare and woke up like in this horrible state. And I always try to think, well, that's interesting. I wonder how if it's related to our vibration, or maybe it's not. Like, it's just very interesting to think about and theorize about.
Well, I'm not sure why that happens. I think I doubt that you can draw a single line that says this is why it always happens, because I suspect it's probably very different in every case. But what I do think is that it's an opportunity, because when you've awakened, even in the middle of the night, from a dream that was not the kind of dream you want, it was a nightmare.
Right.
You have the option of either continuing to focus on the nightmarish aspect of the nightmare, or you have an opportunity to practice pivoting.
Yes, I'm glad you said that, because that's a lot of times I recommend to people that have said they had nightmares. But when you wake up from a nightmare again, then think about, how did you want the dream to go? How did you want it to go? Instead of focusing on how it went, how did you want it to go? And that seems to help a lot. Like, it gives them a place to go, instead of like, oh my God, I'm terrified right now because I just had this nightmare. Instead, well, you know what? I would rather have it gone like this, where this happens instead of that, and that happens instead of that. So that's kind of what you're just saying too. Like, you pivot to how you would have wanted it to go.
And another way to pivot is also to, now, if you find it hard to change the way the dream actually went in your mind, because to be honest, I have trouble with that. I have a difficulty of saying, well, the dream actually went this way, because there's a part of my mind that says, no, it didn't. I know which way it went. But what I can do instead is I can say, you know what? Yeah, I just had a dream about myself and 5 other people being run over by a mad car. But you know what? I don't want to think about that anymore. So I'm going to think about instead that wonderful walk that I took yesterday. I mean, it was gorgeous weather, absolutely gorgeous. And it felt so good. I mean, the temperature was around 70. There's this light, cool breeze. Sun was out. Beautiful, green, lush trees in every direction. I mean, the spring had just come alive. It was just so much life out there. And then when I focus on that, all of a sudden the nightmare goes away.
Right, yes. So you deliberately did something to help get yourself out of that.
Yeah, the key isn't so much whether or not you change the storyline of the nightmare. The key is that you change to something else of some kind. So you don't necessarily think that having a nightmare is related to whether you were at a high or low vibration when you went to sleep? No, not necessarily. I mean, it could be. I can't rule it out. But yeah. I think that's where it's very easy to become over evaluative, like trying to over rationalize all this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and we can get ourselves all worked up about nothing.
But it's interesting to talk about those, isn't it? Because there could be so many possibilities. It's like, yeah, maybe, or maybe it's because of this, or maybe it's because of that.
Well, when I was struggling to get from my very negative place predominantly to what is much more predominantly a positive place now, I found myself spinning out of control doing that kind of thing.
Interesting.
So I actually, yes, it is interesting in the sense that I kept spinning out of control because I kept exploring all the possibilities.
Right.
But it was also nightmarish. So I guess part of me says, you know, I'm not so sure it's really a great idea to follow all those rabbits down the rabbit holes. You know, you go down enough rabbit holes, you can find some pretty messy stuff down there, pretty smelly, nasty stuff. You know, maybe it's not such a good idea to go down all the rabbit holes. So instead, I try to ask myself and answer questions through research and experience and anything else that I can find talking to other people like you. I try to answer certain questions. I try to limit myself to a scope of inquiry that I think actually is going to produce positive results, and not let myself spin out of control by considering all the possibilities. Yeah. That's my approach anyway. So anyway, at the end of each of these chapters, Rhonda includes, it's sort of like a summary. You get this in a lot of books, especially textbooks, where they summarize what was in the chapter. So she has her list of summaries for the chapter. Let me read those to you because I think they basically summarize what we've been talking about here. First, the law of attraction is a law of nature. It is as impartial as the law of gravity. Nothing can come into your experience unless you summon it through persistent thoughts, which we're all very good at.
Mm-hmm.
To know what you're thinking, ask yourself how you are feeling. Emotions are valuable tools that instantly tell us what we are thinking. It is impossible to feel bad and at the same time have good thoughts. That's reassuring to me. I don't know about you, but that tells me, okay, anytime I'm feeling bad, there's a way out.
Yes.
Your thoughts determine your frequency, and your feelings tell you. That's the first time they brought in the word frequency, by the way. Your thoughts determine your frequency, and your feelings tell you immediately what frequency you are on. When you feel bad, you are on the frequency of drawing more bad things. When you feel good, you are powerfully attracting more good things to you. Secret shifters, such as pleasant memories, nature, or your favorite music, can change your feelings and shift your frequency in an instant. And the feeling of love is the highest frequency you can emit. The greater the love you feel and emit, the greater the power you are harnessing.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the secret summaries for the chapter about the secret.
Yeah, that's really good information. Yep, yeah, very good.
Secret shifters, that's an interesting phrase, because that's really, I guess that's a pivot, isn't it?
Secret shifters,
secret shifters, such as pleasant memories,
shifting,
nature.
Yes.
Yeah, so a shifter is her word for what Abraham Hicks calls a pivot. I like pivot better, but...
I know, pivot seems a little easier.
Yeah, but shifter, it is shifting when you think about it. It really is.
It is. And you noticed that was the first time she used the word frequency.
Yeah. That was confusing to me.
Bringing it in.
Well, when I first read, I said, my first reaction to seeing it was, okay, here comes the woo-woo. And my second reaction was, so what does that mean, frequency? And I got hung up on frequency for the longest time. Vibration and frequency really threw me, because I knew what frequency was where, say, sound waves are concerned. Okay, that's clear enough to me, okay? But law of attraction, what's the energy? Sound waves, and we know what kind of energy that is. It's sound.
Mm-hmm.
You know? What's the energy where law of attraction? What's that energy like? And there was a great big rabbit hole going on right there.
Well, it's how you feel. If you're feeling excited and happy, you're putting at a high frequency.
Well, from my perspective, that doesn't answer the question.
You're too scientific, so you like to get into all those nooks and crannies.
Well, actually, I don't. That's my point earlier. If I go to all of them, I go crazy, so I'm selective about it. But this was one I really wanted to know about, because I figure if you're going to understand the law of attraction, it's useful to know what's vibrating.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to buy into this concept of something vibrating, I want to know what it is. And I can't say I have a full answer on what it is yet, but the best answer I have is that it's spiritual energy.
Mm-hmm.
It's very similar to, and perhaps even the same in some sense, as electrical energy or sound energy or heat energy.
Right.
But it is its own type of energy, and it's an energy that perhaps we as a material world have not totally learned how to measure. But on the other hand, perhaps we have. We can measure brain waves, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of energy is in a brain wave?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you talk to an early neurophysicist, they'll tell you it was an electrical energy. But now neuroscientists will tell you, well, there's a lot more than just electrical going on in the brain and throughout the body, in fact. There's a lot of chemical going on, a lot of chemical reactions. That's where the peptides are involved.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you've got all that going on, which part of that is the energy?
Right. And kind of like what you said before with the scale, I almost feel like, I mean, the 1 to 10 scale is good because it's easy to understand.
Right.
But I almost feel like you could be higher than a 10.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes you want to express that you're higher. I'm a 36, man.
But I guess the 1 to 10 scale, it makes it easier for people to kind of get it. But sometimes I think, wow, I think maybe I was higher than a 10 the other day. I don't know.
How high is up, right?
Right.
So what's the tell us a story. I've been telling a few stories. I want to hear a story from like what's been happening the last week or so. Tell us something that ties into this whole concept of pivoting and getting into that positive place and staying there. Something that came out of your experience. Can you think of anything?
Well, I'll just use a client experience. This guy has his own company, and it's going through a lot of problems right now, like especially financially, okay?
Okay.
So he's like really caught up in how bad the company is doing, and is he going to have to lay off some people, all those kind of thoughts. And I was working with him on pivoting, on deliberately, okay, every time you get concerned about that, deliberately force yourself to flip whatever, the company's going to keep losing money to the opposite. Oh, but it's not. I'm like, I know, but you're so caught up in all the bad stuff going on with the company, you got to change your vibration about it, at least from a vibrational point of view. So, work with me, work with Law of Attraction and start deliberately doing that. And a week later when we talked again, he just said it just made such a huge difference. And actually, not only did it make it...
What did he do? Did he do something specific?
Well, with the pivoting you're talking about, like specifically, every time he thought, oh, my God, we're losing more money this week, he would go to the opposite of about what he wanted. Like, I really want the company to start making money, but just feels so good for the company to start making money, and then go into all the reasons why, because then once the business bank account is full again, it would just be easier to make payroll, and then I could start living how I was used to living, and that would just feel so good. Like deliberately changing his focus.
Good for him.
Yeah, and it made a huge difference. And not only that, which I'm not surprised about, some of the people that he was waiting for to use his services suddenly started contacting him that they want to take it to the next step.
Now, that's cool for two reasons. It's cool because it happened, but it's also cool that it illustrates the concept of how like attracts like.
Absolutely, yes.
Because he wasn't actually trying to attract anything more than feeling good. He was just trying to turn his whole emotional state around. That was about it. But what came out of it was a whole bunch of business hitting that hadn't hit before, and he wasn't really expecting that.
Right, and I was really... because this is someone who claims they're really into the law of attraction, and I kept telling him, like, that you can't keep focusing on what is and expect what you want to manifest.
Right.
You have to deliberately start focusing on what you want, so that the what you want becomes your what is. And I know it could be a little difficult, especially like in a crisis time, but you got to do your best to slowly shift your focus.
Yep. And certainly it's easy to get stuck on what is. I mean, the illusions in this life are amazing. They are amazing.
Yeah,
they're totally, they'll just grab our attention and hold it like, wow.
Yes, and especially when there seems to be a crisis situation going on, then you really get focused on what is. And it's like, no, you got to shift that to what you want, even though it feels hard right now because what is seems so traumatic.
Well, that's the art form. The art form is recognizing that happens and then getting yourself to change your thought process, even in the face of that what is. That's the art. Just convincing yourself it's really, remember, it's going to work. These are all illusions.
That's right. And I always tell people it's not that you don't tend to your business still or whatever it is they're talking about, but on a vibrational level, you got to do your vibrational work, your law of attraction work.
That's true. We got about 30 seconds left, so let's do our wrap-up here. First of all, I want to remind everybody, thank you for listening to us here on PRN. You can also find us at our website, loatoday.net. Subscribe there. Find us in the iTunes store. We're on YouTube. We're on Facebook. And, David, where can they find Life Coach David?
They can find out more about Life Coach David at lifecoachdavid.com.
Oh, well, duh.
And right, I made it very easy. And they could find out more about me and sign up for my Law of Attraction newsletter, and it's a good site. So lifecoachdavid.com.
Sounds great. Well, David, it's been a pleasure as usual.
Yes, same here. I fully enjoyed it.
We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.